All right, let's just do this. So, this is the week of. Let me close these other tabs out. This is the week of June 8th through 14th, 2020. And before I get into going day by day, there's just two main themes that are applying to the entire week. Um, Not just the entire week, but this time in general. One is that we're in between eclipses, and the other is that Mercury's in its pre shadow, and this week Mercury's slowing down. It's going very slow, and it's preparing to go retrograde. And so first about the eclipses, the first one happened June 5th at 15 degrees Sagittarius, and it was a full moon lunar eclipse. The next eclipse will happen June 20th at 0 degrees Cancer, and it's a new moon solar eclipse. So basically, this for this particular eclipse season, we have these two eclipses: one full moon lunar eclipse, one new moon solar eclipse. And between June 5th and June 20th, we're obviously in between them. And what that means is like it's pretty much to me, it's like the eye of the storm because you have all this turbulence on either side of these events that are going on. But in the middle, there's this weird like vortex, or where the pressure feels different, where it's very intensified and pressured, but at the same time, it almost feels lighter. At the same time, it's like an aversion or an anomaly. And basically, what the anomaly is during this time, during this roughly 2 weeks or so, many things are possible that are not normally possible or not normally likely. As I've said before, huge changes can happen, whether it be in your life or in the world. So you can more easily just get up and move across the country, or end a relationship, or start a relationship, or the world can fluctuate more. Um, and of course this happens every eclipse season, but as you can tell, this is a particularly potent eclipse season. And I wanted to say about the first eclipse, which happened on June 5th. There are many parallels to June of 2016. So in general, there's many parallels between June 2016 and June 2020 in the astrology. In that, in June 2016, we had a grand mutable cross. Um, Basically, so it was Neptune was still in Pisces, and we had Jupiter was in Sagittarius at the time, and then we had, or no, Jupiter was in Virgo, Saturn was in Sagittarius, and then we had, as the inner planets passed through Gemini, it made this grand mutable square. And that was during the time where, obviously, that was an election year, just like 2020 is. And also, it was an election year where Trump was one of the presidential candidates, just like this year. So obviously, there was a lot of tension and debate surrounding that in June 2016 as well as this June. So that's one parallel. But also, June 2016 was just a crazy time where we had the clowns in America, which was sort of unexplained, or at least I never got an answer to that. But we had the wildfires and the intense hurricane season, and like no matter what part of the country you were in, there was destruction and just weird things happening. Um, so, a lot of what happened in June 2016 is different than what's happening now, but you can see just the general themes of like chaos and everything shifting and this crossroads and unexplained events happening, mass confusion. Um, just everything gets so scattered with these, um, with one mutable sign, but then if you're combining it with two or three different mutable signs and then adding eclipse energy to it, um, there's just so much going on that you can't possibly integrate all of it as it's happening. And that brings me to the other thing which is happening, which is Mercury slowing down. That's another thing saying that basically, so Mercury entered its pre-shadow June 1st, and I don't want to get too specific with the events that are going on, but George Floyd died on May 25th. So by June 1st, only 5 or so days later, everyone knew about it. There were protests everywhere, And basically, astrologically, June 1st, Mercury entered its pre-shadow, which means that so when Mercury enters its pre-shadow, it's in its pre-shadow from June 1st through June 18th. And during that time, it's going to slow down a lot because June 18th it goes retrograde. Um, and planets don't just suddenly, they're not zooming forward and then they just suddenly turn around and go backward. They gradually slow down to the point where they're basically not even moving, and then that's called stationary. And then they start to turn retrograde and then they go backward. Um, but during the pre shadow, you start out entering the pre shadow, especially with Mercury. Mercury is flying when it's at its peak speed, and when it first enters its pre shadow, it's in the territory that it will eventually retrograde. But it's going forward and it's going very fast. So there's too much happening. There's too much stuff happening to integrate. There's all this new stuff happening, obviously in the world, but also in your personal lives. Um, you can't possibly keep up with it. Like I can guarantee you that since June 1st, there's something in your life as well as things in the world, obviously, that you're just not processing yet, that you're not aware of, and that's okay. This is natural with Mercury retrograde cycles. Mercury retrograde will revisit this territory and sort of more thoroughly integrate it. We're gonna basically what's happening between June 1st and June 18th. We're gonna revisit a lot of these same themes later. Um, so during this whole period, it's unlikely that you're gonna get full clarity on everything. And don't. I'm not saying just give up. Obviously, make decisions as with being as informed as you can. But don't be surprised if there's things going on now that you won't find out about till after June 18th. And if you feel overwhelmed, it's okay. Just go with the flow. Um, yeah, you really just got to go with the flow because you're not gonna understand everything right now, and you don't have to. Okay, yeah, I think I pretty much covered eclipse seasons. It's just a weird time. Just having being in between these two eclipses as Mercury's about to go retrograde. Like we're obviously at a crossroads. We're at a shifting point. The worlds are splitting. Um, so yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. And it could be with the eclipse season and with these things in general that are happening. You can interpret these things in different ways. You can see it as a crisis. You can see it as a bad thing, and in many ways, it has been very destructive and chaotic, and that's something we need to deal with, whether it be in our personal lives or in the world. Um, but at the same time, you could view it as an opportunity for growth. If there's basically, it's demanding change. It's demanding self responsibility. Like obviously, these large infrastructural systems that we have in place in our society are not reliable, and so that could be interpreted as a crisis where you just break down. But you could also rise to the occasion and innovate and find new solutions or do things more yourself. Um, so I mean, it's just a huge plot twist. It's a huge chaotic shift between two large chapters, between many chapters. Many worlds are splitting, many timelines are splitting right now. And ultimately, just, yeah, you gotta just do the best you can and don't. It's not gonna be perfect. Things are a little bit sloppy right now, and that's okay. Okay, so going into this week, we start June 8th. And so, like I said, we just had the eclipse a few days prior at 15 Sagittarius. So now the moon is in the much more sober sign of Capricorn, where it's in detriment, and it's also crossing these. I want to say three larger planets. I know Pluto is relatively small, but in their themes or in their energies, these are very large, like heavy planets compared to the moon. So the moon it has to be structured and disciplined, which is not very easy for the moon. It's just a more difficult part of, every month, every time the moon goes through this area, it's just more difficult. We're reminded of usually the COVID situation or whatever's going on in the world, I guess, now. with these other situations that are happening. Um, you can't really escape what's going on. Um, like we do have periods sometimes where we can kind of uh, get lost in fantasizing or get lost in other activities. But when the moon is right in this area, you kind of have to face reality. It's a more it's very realistic and sobering, I guess. So midday, Monday, June 8th, the moon crosses these planets. There's no exact planetary aspects other than the moon. And then by Monday evening, the moon enters Aquarius. So there is some relief there. It does have to cross over Saturn, which is some more of that, structuring energy. So people might just feel agitated. We're still coming down off of this eclipse. So Friday, there's this huge explosion or this huge shift. And now the eclipse is over, but we're still, not only are we in between eclipses in general, but also we just had the eclipse. So the moon is still, it's still gaining light, it's gaining power. So that it's still gaining intensity in that aspect. And it's still coming down off of the high of the eclipse. So things are just very tense. There's a lot of energy. Like the energy is like very thick, if that makes sense. Um, so being in Capricorn and applying that thick, high energy, is just very, very intense, I guess. So I do think that Monday evening going into Tuesday, the moon will enter Aquarius, and then especially once you get into, depending on where you are, once you get into midday Tuesday, the moon will be in Aquarius and it will be past Saturn, so it gets much lighter. Like I said, the moon is gaining power, and it's gaining light, gaining power, and it's also going away from the full moon lunar eclipse. Um, so there's still a lot of energy, but things get a little bit easier going into Tuesday. Um, and again, there's not a lot of exact planetary aspects this week in general. There's no exact aspects Tuesday. There's not even really any aspects with the moon on Tuesday. Well, sort of. Moon squares Uranus. I mean, things are just really intense in general right now, but Tuesday it just gets relatively a little bit less tense. But it's still, the overall situation is very intense and very, just everything I said with the eclipse seasons, being between eclipses, it's like that you're being pressurized or you're being um it's weird because usually like you can feel the astrological energies, and you can feel whether it's earth or water is usually like thicker, and you have to be more considerate with or deliberate with your actions, and with fire or air energy it's thinner, so you can sort of be more spontaneous or sporadic. And being between eclipses like this, to me it feels almost like a combination of both, where the energy is very thick, and it's almost like requiring all of it. It's the energy is very thick, and you do have to be deliberate, but at the same time, it's almost like hot in a way, or like you can also, even though the energy is so thick, you can also be easily very spontaneous and sporadic at this time. Like I guess very intense, large events and themes can very easily happen right now, if that makes sense. So that just applies to this week in general. But Tuesday it gets a little bit lighter, and then especially going into Wednesday, the moon in Aquarius begins to trine. Um, First, it'll trine Venus on Tuesday, I think. Yeah. Um, and then Wednesday, the moon will trine the sun. And so it's a waxing gibbous moon. The moon's gaining light. It's a very intense time, but the moon and the sun are in alignment, so the male and female archetypal energies are sort of in agreement. Um, so I mean, Tuesday and Wednesday, especially Wednesday, it looks like there could be an opportunity for some positive change, whether it be in your life or in the world. It might be an opening for solutions, or for um, it could be just something fun, could be some like just enjoying something intellectual and fun, but it could also be like real solutions to what's going on. But in general, it looks lighter, like in the middle of a very intense general time. Tuesday and Wednesday are relatively light and easy. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not a lot of aspects. Thursday, Thursday in the morning, Moon enters Pisces, and again we've got Mercury going super slow. Mercury's gonna go retrograde at 14 degrees, and I'm gonna say all this later too as we get closer to Mercury retrograde, but it'll go retrograde at 14 degrees, so it's already pretty much stationary. So I should just mention that this week in general, Mercury slowing down means that the mental energy is intensifying, and that so we already have this intense eclipse season, but also Mercury going stationary. Things are becoming intense when it comes to how we communicate with each other. As if that wasn't already intense. It looks like it's going to become more intense this week, and just in general, anything having to do with coordinating or anything having to do with Mercury. Like I guess it's pretty obvious that if you want to travel right now, it has to be very deliberate. Mercury stationary, going stationary in Cancer is very restricted. It's not very mobile, so we're becoming very fixed and defensive in our ideas and in our mobility. We're stuck at home or we're stuck in our areas, but we're also stuck in our belief systems or our methods of thinking. And so it's not, as far as Mercury is concerned, it's, well, and just a lot of the stuff in general, even though we're in Gemini season, these things aren't conducive for compromise or being open-minded to people who are different than you, or expanding yourself to new experiences. The energy is much more defensive right now, and it's clamped down, and it's sort of about protecting what's yours. It's about beliefs that you hold to be true, that you're defending your beliefs, or some people are literally defending their physical property or defending their home. So, it could be like that on a very physical level, but also intellectually or mentally or emotionally. Everything's just very defensive and clamped down. So anyway, so I'm kind of going on a rant, but that applies to this whole week in general, but it's intensifying as we get later into the week, as Mercury slows down. And it's also not exact by aspect, but by sign it's opposing Pluto and Jupiter. So yeah, it's a lot of intensity. I just keep saying intense. It's very intense, and it's getting more intense. Okay, but anyway, so Wednesday going into Thursday, the morning of Thursday, June 11th, the moon does enter Pisces, and it's approaching the third quarter moon, and again, we're in the middle of eclipse season, so these lunar phases are much more potent. It's not just the full moon lunar eclipse and the new moon solar eclipse. The quarter moons surrounding this area are also very intense, or just the moon phase in general. Okay, but Thursday we do have Sun square Neptune. And even though the aspect is exact on Thursday, to me it more comes about on late Friday, early Saturday. And the reason why is because we finally have that third quarter moon. Depending on where you are, it's either late in the evening Friday or early morning Saturday. So like basically Friday night. Around midnight, give or take, depending on where you are. But this quarter moon is interesting not just because it's involved in a lunar phase which is centered around eclipses, but also because of that aspect I just mentioned, basically. So we've got sun square moon, which is a quarter moon. Here, let me find the exact time. Well, right here, I mean, you can see right when the moon conjoins Mars and Neptune, right when all three of them are conjunct, they're all squaring the sun basically. And if you want to go to the exact, if you want to go to the exact quarter moon, that's basically what it would look like right here. So, like I said, late Friday, June 12th, or early Saturday, June 13th. All three of these conjunct squaring the sun. So third quarter moon conjunct Mars and Neptune. So what this to me says is, like I said, it's very potent, and it's basically people are being very defensive over their beliefs, defensive for each other. Basically, everyone is fighting for what they think is the collective. Um, and it's sort of a contradiction. But okay, let me say. So Mars is in Pisces. Pisces is about, the entire collective. We are all one. We're all one spirit or what have you, and but Mars is very divisive. And so Mars in Pisces is kind of a paradox on its own, especially conjunct Neptune, because since Neptune rules Pisces, Neptune has a lot to do with a lot of the same themes of collective unity and everything. But Mars is, by its nature, divisive, and it wants to fight whatever sign it's in. Mars is either fighting for what that sign represents, or it's fighting against what that sign represents. So, and the moon squaring the sun, aspecting this, or highlighting this aspect, is just bringing to light this energy. So people are fighting what they think is the collective. People want to fight for equality, or fight for everyone. No one is fighting just for themselves, if that makes sense. They're fighting for what they believe is the common good. But unfortunately, a lot of people are confused about what they're fighting for, or how to fight about it. And I don't want to get into specifics, because I'm coming at this from a metaphysical standpoint. I don't claim to know who's right and who's wrong or whatever. I don't think it's really about that. I just think I think in many ways the intent is good, but there's just so much chaos and confusion that people don't have all the facts right now at all. And a lot of people, there's just chaos and confusion. There's a lot of misunderstanding, and there's a lot of heated energy, people becoming upset and heated and fighting for what they think is the common good, but maybe they're fighting the wrong person, or maybe they don't understand exactly what it is they're fighting for, or what their intention is, or what they want to get out of the situation, or maybe some people might actually be destroying what they think it is that they're fighting for. There's all these confusing situations revolving around these themes. Yeah, so I predict, I don't know how that will play out exactly, but it looks like, I keep saying intense. It looks really intense, and it looks like the third quarter moon is, in general, third quarter moons are a little bit more detached than first quarter moons, but they still make people restless. In general, even just a normal third quarter moon makes everyone restless, makes people, animals, restless and more active, and makes them stay up later at night. So to have that during an eclipse season and conjunct Neptune and Mars in Pisces, to me that really looks like people are going to be protesting more. Like there's going to be another wave of protests, or something, even if it's not literally protests. People are gonna be feeling totally restless and emotional, and like it's the last straw, and like they want to make a stand, whether they're right or wrong or whatever. That's what's going on Friday and Saturday. So yeah, looks intense. Usually the moon in Pisces is a chill transit, but just with all this confusion, it's almost like a combination of universal love and love for the fellow human and everything, versus like hatred. And I think sometimes those two things might be confused, or might seep into each other, that a lot of people are mad at the world, and a lot of people love the world, and there's all this confusing emotions and um, mixed mixed intuitive signals. Like people aren't fully understanding, back to the Mercury pre-shadow thing. There's just a lot of confusion. I don't think um, there's not a lot of unified energy. Everything's kind of scattered and confused. Um, okay, so going into late Saturday, so I'm back at. Let me go back to like noon, around noon. Okay, so late Saturday night, the moon enters Aries, and it's just been kind of weird lately that there's no fire planets at all, really. So it'll just be Chiron and the moon in Aries. There's nothing in Leo or Sagittarius. Um, so again, the moon isn't really aspecting anything. Um, let's see. And that whole dynamic with the third quarter moon conjunct Mars and Neptune, it really applies to Friday and Saturday because, like I said, depending on where you are, it might technically be on either Friday or Saturday, but it's also potent enough that it would easily seep into both sides. So wherever you are, I could see it sort of influencing both days. That's the main thing I have for Saturday. Moon enters Aries. This might sound counterintuitive, but I think as the moon enters Aries, it would almost calm down more, which is really weird for leaving Pisces and entering Aries. Usually things would become more active. But the moon is separating from Mars and Neptune, but mostly Mars. And then it's also separating from the third quarter, that square aspect with the sun. So, and it's starting to finish. It's concluding the lunar cycle. Um, so the moon at this point is, I messed up before. I said it was gaining light when it wasn't. But the moon has been losing light since the full moon, and at this point, after the quarter moon, there's sort of this like, kind of last stand or last explosion of energy, and then after that, things tend to wind down because um, the moon is lit up half full at the quarter moon square aspect, and then after that, it's less than half full and it's losing its light. So it's sort of dying in a way, and this happens every month, obviously, but it's becoming a crescent moon, and by sign, the moon is starting to sextile the sun. So it becomes more harmonious, more quiet, more winding down. And then now we are approaching the new moon solar eclipse, in less than a week. So, so I see sort of an explosion of energy on Friday and Saturday. And then after that, things are winding down, but they're also preparing for the next eclipse, which I'll talk about in next week's video. Um, Other than that, on Sunday, June 14th, we do have the Sun quincunx Pluto. So, so the Sun, basically, as the Sun is approaching the end of Gemini, it'll quincunx Pluto and Jupiter, and then as it enters Cancer, right as it enters Cancer, that's when we'll have the new moon solar eclipse, and then right after that, it'll quincunx Saturn, and all that. Most of that's happening next week, but in general, we're just facing. I mean, this sounds pretty obvious, but there's gonna be more criticism of the government and of the general situations at hand. Um, Going into Sunday, people will be fed up with the government's lack of response, or if they're responding inappropriately. And I think this applies to all the protest situations as well as the COVID situation. There's going to be some disagreement on how to react to those situations, or what kind of corrections need to be implemented, basically. On Sunday, there's just this disconnect between the government and the authority figures versus the people, basically. So that could have a lot of different applications, or could manifest in different ways. And also, the moon in Aries squares Mercury, so I mean, just like all these aspects, a lot of these aspects are just sort of stressing the same themes that I've already been talking about, where everyone's very divided, and there's just so much like splitting. I keep thinking of like splitting, or splitting of worlds, or people are divided by their emotions and their thoughts and their beliefs, and everything's chaotic and confused, and it's kind of a mess, honestly. And I'm not being critical of that, because that could be good. There could be things that were just dealt with before, that we've deemed that are no longer acceptable, that we need to make improvements on. And there could be things that are being destroyed right now, that maybe we could replace with better things. Obviously this is kind of vague, but I'm not saying that what's going on right now is either good or bad. Basically, we're just at a huge crossroads, or a huge time of change. So that's pretty much what I see. I guess I'll just list off the dates just concerning the Mercury retrograde, just because we are already in the sort of process of it. June 1st, Mercury enters pre-shadow at 5 degrees Cancer. June 18th, Mercury goes retrograde at 14 degrees Cancer. July 12th, Mercury stations direct at 5 degrees Cancer. And then July 26th, Mercury finally leaves the post shadow at 14 degrees Cancer. So Mercury's really only retrograde for 3 weeks, or a little bit over 3 weeks. So I think it's one of the relatively shorter Mercury retrograde periods. But it's in its pre-shadow for a full about 3 weeks as well. Almost 3 weeks, 2.5. So I really think that we're going to gain a lot of clarity about what's going on now next month. Yeah, there's just so much going on. It's just go for a walk, or cook some food, or meditate, or hit a punching bag, or work out. Do something that helps you integrate everything, and because there's just so much going on that it could fry your nervous system. That's something I've been dealing with. But yeah, you have to drink lots of water and everything, because there's just so much energy happening right now that it could be really easy to just become totally stressed and to just check out, because it's difficult to stay informed and to be aware of what's going on in the world, but also not be overly connected to what's happening and overly stressed, or overly confused. You have to maintain yourself and keep your discernment going, but also know what's right for you, I guess, in terms of how to react to the situation, and just making sure you have the facts before you potentially overreact. Yeah, but I don't mean to sound critical at all, because I think we're all just dealing with what's happening the best we can, and there's just so much going on right now that you just gotta do your best, and forget the rest. So, okay, so I'll see you guys next week. Yeah, hopefully that was informative. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.